The sky was still dim when Marcus Thompson wiped his hands on an old rag and unlocked the doors of Thompson Auto Works. For 23 years, this small corner garage in Detroit had been more than a workplace for him, it was his legacy. A single father who had raised his son on honest wages and late nights under car hoods, Marcus was known not just for fixing engines, but for fixing anything he could, free of cost, if he had to. He believed that kindness didn't cost a dime. Life hadn't been easy. Marcus had lost his wife, Clara, to cancer 12 years ago. Since then, it had been just him and Jamie, his son. He had worked tirelessly, missing meals, skipping doctor visits, and declining vacations to ensure Jamie got everything he needed, a good education, a safe home, and above all, a father who never gave up. That morning, as he sipped his bitter black coffee, the quiet hum of routine was broken by a deafening knock. A young paramedic, her eyes wide with desperation, stood at his entrance. "Sir, our ambulance broke down 3 blocks away. We have a patient in critical condition. Please, we need help." Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed his tool bag, jumped in his pickup truck, and followed her. When they arrived, the ambulance sat lifeless, its engine dead. Inside, through the open back doors, he glimpsed an unconscious man, pale, barely breathing. The paramedic shouted, "If we don't get him to the hospital in 10 minutes, he won't make it." Marcus slid under the hood, his mind racing. The problem was serious, a seized fuel pump. He had no replacement, but years of improvisation had taught him to be creative. Using a hose, a few clamps, and a part from his own truck, he patched together a temporary fix. "Try it now," he yelled, sweat pouring down his temples. The engine coughed, then roared to life. The paramedics took off, leaving behind a trail of thanks and flashing lights. Marcus stood there alone, breathless, heart pounding, not from the rush, but from hope. He had saved a life today. That meant something. Or so he thought. When he returned to the shop, his boss, Ron, a profit-obsessed man who cared little for anything beyond ledgers and invoices, stood waiting. Arms crossed. "You left the premises during work hours. You used company tools. Unauthorized. That's theft, Marcus." "Ron, it was a life-or-death situation. The man would have died. You're fired." The word hit like a punch. Fired. Just like that. No hearing, no chance to explain. The garage that bore his name was now a memory. Marcus walked home that night with a heavy heart. Not for the job, but for what it represented, security, dignity. How would he tell his son, Jamie, who was starting college next semester? Days passed. The neighborhood rallied. Local news ran a segment about the mechanic who saved a life. Social media erupted with praise. But praise doesn't pay rent. Despite the love, Marcus remained jobless, struggling to hold on. He applied at several garages, but Ron's shadow followed him. His former boss made sure Marcus wouldn't get a second chance. It seemed like the entire city had closed its doors to him. The days grew darker, lonelier. He began fixing neighbors' cars for groceries, trading labor for bread. Jamie offered to pause his studies and take a job, but Marcus refused. "Your education is the one thing I'll never compromise," he said firmly. "We'll get through this." Unbeknownst to Marcus, the patient he had indirectly saved was none other than Jonathan Reynolds, the CEO of Orion Motors, a leading automobile manufacturer. Jonathan had been on a private trip in Detroit to visit an old friend from college when the heart attack struck. He was unconscious during the rescue, but upon recovery, he learned of the incident in a detailed report from his assistant. The name, Marcus Thompson, stood out. "Find him," Jonathan instructed. It took days, but finally, the black luxury sedan pulled up outside Marcus's modest home. A sharply dressed man stepped out, flanked by security. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" "Yes." The man extended a hand. I'm Jonathan Reynolds, CEO of Orion Motors. Marcus froze. You don't know me, but you saved my life. I was the man in that ambulance. Jonathan's voice cracked with emotion. I had a heart attack while visiting a friend. If you hadn't fixed that engine, I wouldn't be here. Marcus was speechless. I watched the news. I read everything. And I realized, someone like you shouldn't be fixing cars in a back alley. You should be leading change. So I'm offering you a job. Not just any job, a directorship at Orion. You'll head our emergency vehicle reliability initiative. Marcus stammered, but I'm just a mechanic. Jonathan smiled. You're more than that. You're a man of integrity. A leader. And that's what this industry needs. The next few months were transformative. Marcus, who once worked with rusted bolts and fading spark plugs, was now overseeing state-of-the-art designs. He insisted on including features that could prevent the very breakdown that almost cost Jonathan his life. He created a program called Rapid Fix that trained mechanics across the country to act fast during vehicle emergencies. He also launched a scholarship in Clara's name, for children of mechanics to study engineering and automotive design. He never forgot the garage, nor the streets of Detroit that raised him. He returned often, donating tools, mentoring young boys who reminded him of Jamie. One day, at the Orion annual conference, he was invited to deliver the keynote address. He stood in front of thousands of engineers, executives, and workers. A moment of compassion once cost me my job, he began. But it gave me a purpose. In that ambulance, I wasn't thinking about rules or bosses. I was thinking about someone's father, husband, or brother dying. If you lead with your heart, even when the world says you're wrong, you'll always end up right. The crowd rose in applause. And somewhere in that crowd, Jamie, his son, smiled with pride, knowing his father had not only saved a man's life, but changed countless others through the ripple effect of a single selfless act. In a world where most people ask, "What's in it for me?" Marcus asked, "How can I help?" And that made all the difference.